After being away for almost a year, Doctor Who is finally back with 3-hour-long specials to commemorate the show's 60th anniversary, as well as the usual Christmas special. Now, at the time of me recording this video, it will have been about a week or so since the last of the 60th anniversary specials had aired on TV. And I wanted to do a video talking about those 60th anniversary specials in particular, but also Doctor Who's history of doing special one-off episodes, and just generally looking at how Doctor Who is actually, in my opinion, one of the best shows to do those kind of one-off specials, whether it be a festive one for a specific holiday or just a one-off anniversary sort of thing. Now, Doctor Who doing one-off special episodes is something that has almost been there for as long as the show has existed. During Classic Who, you got multiple stories every now and then where you'd get multiple Doctors all bleeding into the same story. So you'd have like the 5 Doctors and the 3 Doctors, and I think even the 2 Doctors at one point. Occasionally those would be done for anniversary specials, but they would also be done just on their own for like a mini event episode as well. And it was a clever way of bringing back fan favourite Doctors and getting them to interact and collaborate with whoever the recent Doctor at the time was. However, when it comes to one-off special episodes, as far as I'm aware, that's as far as Classic Who ever went. You would get the occasional one-off special for comic relief, like there is one where they end up in EastEnders. I've never seen it, but I just know that that exists. And then there was also the spoof one-off special, A Curse of Fatal Death, which is very funny and I highly recommend you watch it just on its own. But again, in terms of one-off specials, that's kind of all that you really got. And this is something that New Who has also done, not as often as Classic Who did it, but the few times they have done it, it has either been for a specific purpose or for the sake of the story. As far as I'm aware, the only times we've seen a multi-Doctor story in play during New Who is during Jodie's second season when we were introduced to Jo Martin's fugitive Doctor, something that Chibnall didn't even explain or rectify or give closure to before he left. So that's still a thing, that's still out there, and it never got explained. And of course the most prominent, biggest example we've got of a multi-Doctor storyline during New Who has been for the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor, where we got David Tennant's 10th Doctor, Matt Smith's 11th Doctor, and the inclusion of John Hurt as the War Doctor, all working together within the same story. And again, that worked because 1, it was the 50th anniversary, and 2, it was a good excuse to kind of wrap up some of the loose plot points that had been kind of hanging around during Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat's eras. However, New Who gave us something that Classic era didn't do for some reason, and that is the introduction of the festive Christmas special, something that kind of got changed during Jodie Whittaker and Chris Chibnall's run into the festive special, and it ended up just going out on New Year's Day. And some of those were fine, but it kind of lacked the same recognition and oomph that a Christmas special would have. It's one thing that I'm actually quite glad they brought into the new run of Doctor Who, and I'm glad they're bringing it back as well with Ncuti Gatwa's run very soon. Because it's a nice change of pace. It allows them to do these one-off episodes that can be a bit weird, can be a bit quirky, can also just be an excuse to have just a ton of fun, and it doesn't necessarily have to connect to the overarching story of the main seasons. It can just be its own standalone thing. Take Voyage of the Damned, for example. It's a decent Christmas episode. It's not one of the best ones they've ever done, but for a fun, self-contained adventure set at Christmas, it works. And with all of that talk of specials, that obviously now brings us up to the 60th anniversary specials. Now, like I said before, during Classic Who, they always used to celebrate whatever anniversary they were celebrating with a special self-contained story episode. It would either be over several parts or it would be this one very long story over like an hour or an hour and a half. And we got that with The Day of the Doctor. That was a feature-length film that actually was played in cinemas, believe it or not. And it felt like an event. It was like, okay, this is the 50th anniversary of the whole of Doctor Who, and if you've seen The Day of the Doctor, you will know that it is a very commendable celebration of the show as a whole. Everything that has come before and just the legacy of the show as a whole. That is what my summation of the 50th anniversary special is. That's what it is celebrating, and that's what you get once you've finished the episode. However, with the 60th anniversary, Russell T Davies has chosen to do something slightly different and give us 3 hour-long specials, all with their own self-contained story. But after seeing the 3 specials, they do actually nicely link into each other as well, but I'll get onto that in a bit. I think the reason these 3 specials worked so well, other than the fact that they were actually written well, unlike the majority of Chibnall's era, is the fact that I feel like they're celebrating different aspects of Doctor Who. For example, The Star Beast is what you could best describe as a very typical Doctor Who adventure. It's a fun romp of an episode. Wild Blue Yonder, on the other hand, is this self-contained episode that is very weird, a little bit creepy, and tries these new and weird ideas in a very self-contained manner. And then you have The Giggle, which in itself kind of feels like a season finale of a series that we haven't got. And it really goes to town in terms of the spectacle and the scale of what Doctor Who is capable of, and just kind of has fun with it at the same time. And this is where I think the 3 specials work in celebrating specific aspects of what makes Doctor Who such a great show in the first place. For example, the first episode, The Star Beast. It's a fun, little, entertaining adventure of an episode and works at celebrating the past of Doctor Who, what makes it work so well, and basically strips it down to its simplest form. And I think it's also a celebration of the past, considering that this story in particular is ripped straight from a classic Doctor Who comic from the 1980s. Then you have Wild Blue Yonder, which I feel like is the best representation of celebrating the show's present, how it currently looks and feels in its current form of New Who. And personally, in my opinion, in terms of dialogue and character writing alone, Wild Blue Yonder is the best of the 3 episodes. It's not my favourite, but in terms of just from a writing standpoint, Wild Blue Yonder is such a breath of fresh air and reminds me why I loved Russell T Davies as a writer in the first place when he originally ran the show back in 2005 to 2010. It's a brilliant self-contained episode that does a great job of celebrating what Doctor Who is currently like and what it is capable of in its current form. It can take this very simple self-contained bottle episode premise, but then introduce these kind of weird and wacky ideas while adding in some slight body horror elements and some existential sci-fi aspect as well. And it's all these elements kind of squeezed into this one specific episode, while again being a brilliant showcase for why Russell T Davies is such a great writer and how well he understands these characters and what makes them tick. And then there is The Giggle, which I think is the best culmination of celebrating the show's future and the potential that it has moving forward. In the grand scheme of things, the episode as a whole, like I said earlier, does feel like a season finale to a series that we've never seen. And in that sense, it again is a really good showcase of what Russell T Davies can do when it comes to season finales, because back in the day, his season finales would always hit just that right chord. Something that Stephen Moffat tried to do and excelled at quite well with Series 5, but with each subsequent season, I felt like his series finales kind of got a little bit more lackluster. That's just my personal opinion. But Russell T Davies always understood the weight and importance of ending your series on a high, whether it's the Series 2 finale, Doomsday, or the Series 1 finale, Parting of the Ways, or even the Series 4 finale, which is probably where the stakes were at their biggest back during his original run. He just understands how to ramp up the stakes and make everything so overblown yet still quite grounded at the same time. And nowhere is this best represented than in The Giggle, where you have some incredibly high stakes. The whole world is going to destroy itself if the Doctor doesn't fix this. You have the reintroduction of a classic Doctor Who villain, which almost had kind of been forgotten to time, but Russell T Davies has brought him back and re-energized him for this new incarnation of Doctor Who in brilliant fashion, may I say. Neil Patrick Harris absolutely steals the show in this one episode, and I kind of want to see a bit more of him, but at the same time I'm happy with what we got. But with The Giggle, it's more specifically how the episode ends in its final act that showcases and celebrates what Doctor Who could be capable of in the future. You get the first ever bi-generation that has ever happened in the show, where the Doctor doesn't straight up regenerate into his next form. He instead splits into two copies of the Doctor. The 14th Doctor, played by David Tennant, still exists, and 15, played by Ncuti Gatwa, also exists in the same space. And again, this is a great example of what the show is capable of and what could potentially happen in future seasons now that there is room for manoeuvrability, and also showcasing that Doctor Who's potential is to an extent quite limitless. You can kind of do whatever you want with the show as long as it works in the logistics of the rules that have been set up by the show itself. And I will admit, when the bi-generation happened in The Giggle, at first I didn't know how to take it. I thought it was great to see these two Doctors on screen at the same time for once, because we've never had that with a regeneration before, and that's kind of Russell T Davies's mentality for why he wanted to do it. Every time the Doctor regenerates, he just goes straight into the next body, and you never see them talk, or you never see them interact with each other, and I feel like there was a lot of lost potential there. And Russell T Davies gave us this, and I think it works really well for the sake of how to close out that episode. Seeing 14 and 15 bounce off of each other in such a brilliant way I thought was such fun to see, and again, for what little screen time we do get, I think it showcases Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor in probably the best way he could have. I honestly don't know what Russell T Davies is going to do in these next few seasons. I'm very excited to see what happens. There is a part of me that's a little bit hesitant as well, just in case he pulls out any more of these wacky and bizarre concepts. But I'm intrigued more than anything else. But yes, that is my thoughts on the 60th anniversary specials. I would love to go into more detail on them, but I just kind of wanted to do a general video talking about why Doctor Who is so good at doing specials in the first place, and why it's one of the few shows that's around at the moment that finds that right balance of doing a special that doesn't go overboard but manages to still know what makes the show great. Because sometimes when a show tries to do like a Christmas special and no one really asked for it, it can feel a little bit forced and doesn't really need to be there, and it just sort of feels like they're doing a Christmas episode for the sake of it. Whereas with Doctor Who, I feel like they work 9 times out of 10. And the same goes for the anniversary specials as well. Every time an anniversary does come around, you can pretty much be guaranteed that it's going to be handled with heart and compassion and a care for the stories and the characters that we all know and love. We got that with the 50th, and we definitely got that with the 60th specials. So guys, those are my condensed thoughts on the 60th anniversary specials. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of them. I love to have a discussion about Doctor Who just generally in the comments. Like the video if you haven't done so already, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.